Hey, what's up? Today we're talking about what lenses and cameras you should rent versus which camera and lenses you should own, right? Different projects call for different gear, and that's what we're talking about today. So, Nathan, we were having a conversation about a particular project we're working on today, and we were thinking, man, what lenses can we rent to step up production? And we kind of, went back and forth on it. And obviously, from a client perspective, I'd say probably 95% of all clients don't pixel peep like filmmakers do. They're not sitting there staring at chromatic aberration and everything. Obviously, soft focus stands out, lens flare stands out. But for the most part, your clients are just wanting a very highly polished, good looking video, something, the word's always being used, cinematic, but for lack of a better term, that's what they're wanting. That's the buzzword. And so in-house, we use Blackmagic cameras and Sigma Art zoom lenses. That's the 18 to 35 and the 50 to 100. That is our core kit. Now, I also have a DZO Pictor 20 to 55. That's a great all-around lens. It's a cine lens. It's more stylized. It's not as sharp and maybe clinical as the Sigma Art lenses, but they all have their different purposes. But as a kit in-house, it's a great foundation. You could probably tackle 75 to 80% of the jobs that we're doing with that kit right there. 18 to 35, 50 to 100 Sigmas, and then the DZO 20 to 55. Now, they don't work well together. They don't play well together. So we are at a point right now in this project where we're going to be doing some gimbal work, and we've got a great gimbal. The problem is that Pictor zoom is really heavy and it may not work. So we were kind of at a crossroads. Do we stick with the Sigmas, run the 18 to 35 on the gimbal for our gimbal shots, and then throw in the 50 to 100 for our extra coverage with the 18 to 35 as needed? And we went back and forth on it. This is a industrial client, so cleanliness and a clean image might actually work well. They seem kind of synonymous, right? But if you put in the DZO characteristics to an industrial setting, you could take a very right angle, rigid, straight, matter of fact industry and bring a more vintage and artistic and unique flair to it. And that's where we decided to use the DZOs. Now, we could have went any route. We could have went to the IRIX. We could have went, if the budget allowed, we could go all the way to, Arri lenses or Ingenues, but the DZO just seemed to kind of hit that sweet spot. But we're at a crossroads. I got a 20 to 55. That's what we're working with. That's our kit right now. So now we're looking at renting, and that's kind of where we're at. As a filmmaker, you got to decide what should you own, what should you rent. And Nathan, this is a great topic this is a good spot for you to jump in because you do a lot of client-facing negotiations. What is that threshold for you? Because you're more on the directing side, and you're really getting up to speed on the technical stuff. And I know I usually handle a lot of that, but let's talk. I want to hear from your perspective as a director. What are these lenses doing for you? Sigma versus DZO versus Arri versus, Summicrons or whatever. Give me your breakdown on how you perceive these.
At Gulf Coast Studios, we've shot a lot of projects on both the Art Sigma series and also the DZO. From a director point of view, if I come at, I've worked with a few different DPs. You and I have worked on quite a bit of projects as well. And I'm sure you've worked with different directors as well. Everybody has a different approach. First of all, we start with the story, and then how can we integrate like the look and the style of integrated into the story. So on this particular project, as you were saying, the look, the DZO kind of has a little vintage look. I know, we have some variations with the primes as opposed to the Pictors, right?
Right.
And I think we didn't want such a clinical look that the Art Sigma series offers. I mean, it's a great look if you want that clinical, clean sharpness, which is great, fantastic. But for this type of, it's a bigger scope and scale, so we want to showcase kind of the scope of it, but also like have a little bit of a dirty feel to it, right? So that's when we thought, like, for not just economical, but just thought, well, what is, we can't afford a Steadicam operator on this. So, we operate on a gimbal. And then we just felt that the Sigmas was just, because a lot of this is going to be out in the open and we're going to have elements. So we'll have some natural atmosphere, right? So we thought, I think the best look to tell this story would be from the Dizio point of view, from the look and the style, and have, I don't think we want to show a vignette, right, on the edges. We still want to have that, solid, crisp look. And, it's funny because from a director point of view, I'm learning a lot of the technical side. So we have these conversations, it's funny to everybody out there. It's like, Jacob, we talk for hours. Why don't we put this on YouTube and maybe answer some, I'm sure some directors or upcoming directors, like, have some ideas that they want to kind of ask DPs, and maybe this could kind of help out.
Yeah. And that's what's so you hit the nail on the head. We have these conversations where we're kind of like theory crafting all these different potential ideas. On one of these episodes, we talked a lot about, bringing the 360, the Insta360 into production, and how that's going to look and how we're going to have to modify it to work in the elements. A lot of these conversations we have on the phone, we're hashing it out. I mean, the videos would be 2 hours long, but this is a good way for us to kind of summarize and wrap up our thoughts. And I think what's really important for the filmmakers out there who are conflicted on their kit and conflicted on maybe their business even, what is your goal as a filmmaker? Are you producing brand integrity films? Are you doing documentaries? Are you doing features? Are you doing commercials? What are you doing? Testimonies? All these different things should weigh in to your decision on what your in-house kit should be. And obviously, you guys know an in-house kit is, what do you own? If I call you right now and say, hey, shoot this for me, you could grab all your gear, grab some batteries, cards, and you can go out and you can shoot something for me today, right now. What cameras work best for that scenario in your case? And then you have clients that call you and say, hey, over the next couple of weeks or months, we want to put together a project and we're kind of going for this style, this look, give me a treatment. And that's when you could say, okay, now what can I rent? I know when I started in filmmaking, I started a long time ago. So it's not obviously a long time ago in the grand scheme of things, but I started in like 2006, 2007. That's when I was young. I was a kid. My dad was an E&G guy. He was a news guy. And I learned on Betacam and JVCs and DV tapes, mini DV tapes. I came from that world. And it was all about just, get the camera set up, get it framed, hit record, come home, edit, or come to the office and edit. Now it's so much more intricate, and kind of coming up and growing up and becoming an adult, and then also, growing professionally in this career. I've had a chance to work with a lot of different cameras, a lot of different lenses, and as a filmmaker, I had to decide, which camera do I want to buy, because renting wasn't as easy as it is now. And I'm saying all this to kind of summarize and say this: I was afraid to rent for a long time because I was always working in a market where our margins were thin. And so I didn't always have a budget to rent. And if I would have rented gear, I would have had a much more wide variety of content and styles. So when, my work was being reviewed by other filmmakers who are looking at more fine details, they would see a bigger latitude of looks and image qualities and, all these things. So I was always afraid to rent. So a lot of my career coming up into the cinema world, when I was doing client work, was, it started with DSLR and photo lenses, and then it went to Blackmagic and photo lenses, and then it eventually went to, a Blackmagic and Cine lenses, but also Arri and Cine lenses, Sony and Cine lenses, some Panasonic and Cine lenses and photo lenses, and all these different combinations. As a filmmaker, I guess you're trying to decide, what level you're at and what level your budget is, and you have to kind of make these choices accordingly. I always heard this wisdom, and it stuck with me, and I think it's very important. Date the body, marry the glass, right? Don't blow all your resources on a camera body, especially if you're early in the filmmaking game, and you're trying to save resources and grow smart. I've had lenses that have lasted me 4 or 5 camera bodies. and I've had camera bodies break on set. I've had things fall apart and image, quality just fade over time. Like, I'm shooting this on a Pocket 4K. This camera never leaves my office because it's literally an in-house camera. The USB port's
Right.
broken on it, but it's still practical. But the lenses I've used on it, I still have and I still use, professionally.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the question you have to ask yourself as a filmmaker. What is the minimum that I can have to produce the best possible result? And then live on the rest of that money. Don't get gas. Don't get gear acquisition syndrome. Pick and choose, because Nathan, me and you have experienced that, and you could talk about that too. But it's like, gear is an alluring thing. You want to buy gear and you want to have gear. It kind of validates you in a way, and it makes you excited. But that excitement eventually wears off, and you end up with an office full of gear you're not using. And I probably use 40% of all the gear I own, and I recently got rid of all kinds of stuff. I believe I mentioned.
So just speaking on that, it's you can have all this gear, and from the directing and storytelling side, and all the filmmakers know this. It's like, at the end of the day, you can have all the nice bells and whistles. You can have the airy cameras, but if you can't tell a story, then you have a problem.
That's right.
So for us, it's like, we always try to start with the story first. What's the scale? What are the clients trying to say? Or sometimes on the documentaries, or if it's a film, script, and that's a different animal. We're talking more clients and commercial work right now in this podcast. But at the end of the day, it's the story, and then what equipment can intertwine with the story to bring it to life, and it adds to your story, right? Because you don't want to have all this equipment, and sometimes I'm sure you've heard this too, Jacob, and seen it. It's like you have this amazing score or sound that overrides, the production, or you have some great visuals, but it's all visuals. There's no story there. So it all kind of starts with, what are you trying to say, and then build around that with the equipment. So real quick to kind of piggyback on what we were saying about this episode is, so the difference we were throwing around was the art series and the Dizio. We like the Dizio look. So from a DP/editor point of view, what makes the Dizios work for this particular project on the post side?
Right.
So we shoot everything obviously in B-raw.
Yes.
For Blackmagic.
Yes.
We use Sony, but for this project, it's B-raw.
Yes. So B-raw is very forgiving in a format. Maybe the Blackmagic sensor is not forgiving always in every situation, but B-raw,
the Super 35, Super 35, but the pockets, the pockets.
Yeah, and look, I'm talking about latitude too, right? Like latitude, color science. Blackmagic's got a lot of good things going for it, but you talked about B-raw. I love B-raw. It's so flexible in post. If we could have B-raw in every camera and every manufacturer, oh my God, it'd be great. ProRes RAW, ARRI RAW, all these RAW formats, they give you a lot of room in post. And a lot of people think, well, you're going to change the image in post. What does it matter on set? It matters incredibly on set. RAW allows you to capture, in my opinion, these RAW codecs and these formats. They allow you to capture all the potential there. And then you have to treat it well in post to make it really truly be the best it could be. It's not about manipulating everything in post and changing it. It's about really being able to expand and use the entire envelope of what you've done on set. And that includes lighting, your lens choice, all of these things. But yes, so, from an editing perspective and from an on-set perspective, one thing we realized is, we're dealing with an industrial client, and the art lenses they're photo lenses, and they're fine. They would work fine, but they're kind of clean. They're kind of clinical. And we're in
and very sharp
too, which, off the bat, you would think, hey, that almost sounds kind of like a great quality to have for an industrial client, because it actually adds like an element of maybe pristine archival logic. Like, if you shoot it in the cleanest, sharpest lens, it shows the true, real life, results of what's happening on this construction site. But they want something emotional. And yes, a camera and that art lenses and these cameras will show very technically what's happening. but there are people working on this job. They have emotions. They're seeing this job through their own eyes and their own way.
Mhm.
You have the public looking at this through their eyes and through their perspective. And you have city officials and county officials, and all these different people bring a lot of emotion into a very matter of fact setting. And I feel like after talking, me and Nathan talked, it's like, you know what? We discussed it, and it's like we both agree the DZO is going to bring a very emotional, organic look to an otherwise cold, right angle environment. And it'll kind of be a little bit juxtaposed. And it's not going to be radical, but it's going to be enough to soften those edges, to bring that human touch to a very, rigid environment and a rigid setting. And so that
Mhm.
may be a little frou-frou and a little out there and, artsy fartsy, but those are the small decisions you make as a filmmaker that really help develop your style. It's those little things over time that really kind of set a precedent for what future
Mhm.
clients and other filmmakers can expect from you
Right.
when they're working with you. They start to see your style. They see how you pair client expectations and on-set environments, talent,
Mhm.
scores, color grade, lighting, lenses, and camera. They see how all that comes together, and that's really how you develop a style. And that's why it's important. The gear you keep on hand for those moments where you have to shoot something and you have to shoot it now needs to be good. It needs to be
Absolutely.
quality. It needs to work. But some
Mhm.
of these projects, you really got to look at, what is best for the project. And that's where we are, So we're going to
Yep.
shoot primarily on the 20 to 55 DZO, the Pictor, the Zoom, right? The Pictor Zoom. And then we're also getting a 21 millimeter DZO Prime. And that's going to allow us to do a lot of gimbal shots. Now, that's a full frame lens. And on our Blackmagic pockets that we're using on this project, we're going to get a little bit of a crop factor. Off the top of my head, I think the calculation would be something probably around a 30, maybe 30, between 30 and 35 field of view, but it'll have the
Mhm.
image qualities of a 21 millimeter. So we're going to be a little bit forgiving on depth of field. So focus pulling will be a little more forgiving, and we'll still have the movement and the vibe of the 21, but we'll have the field of view of a 30. So our focus will be
Right.
more narrowed, but I feel like it'll have more energy and it'll be more forgiving on a gimbal with pulling focus, because we'll have a first AC as much as we can, but because it's a restricted site, and that's another thing we're dealing with on this is, you know it's a very controlled, very restricted site. It's a construction site, so we have to be careful who we bring on. They have to be professionals. They have to, really be, on top of their game. And we'll have times where we can use them and times where we can't. So we need a versatile lens where we can
Right.
do it with a small crew, but also a lens that we can use with a bigger crew. And that's why we chose it. And that's the beauty of, also that comes into your equation for figuring out what to use. How many people are helping you?
Right.
Is a cinema lens practical? Is a photo lens better? What's your focus throw? I mean, is it, if you're going to rack
Mhm.
focus a lot and you're by yourself with a cinema lens, are you going to be sitting there cranking on that lens and, introducing shake and instability into the composition because you're having to manipulate a cine lens, when a photo lens would have did it great because you could just sit there and, with
Yeah.
fine motor skills, get that same result. So many things weigh into these decisions, from a technical
Right.
perspective, you know.
No, well said. And I think, this probably is when you're working on productions from a director to a DP standpoint, these conversations happen all the time. If you have to plan out first of all, you have to plan out the story. And then second and third is, you have to plan out, your look, your feel, and then your shot list. You have to go through, and then what's workable,
Yeah.
right? If you can't afford or have a Steadicam op, you got to operate in a gimbal, and you can't have a ton of big lenses on that gimbal, so you got to make it work. But Jake, well said. And this particular podcast was just about kind of our choices, what lenses we want, and then we'll talk more about in detail as we go on with the production,
Yeah.
and more to come.
Yeah. Nathan said it best. It's story first. If you start there, you can make that decision. Use what I got or rent. And that's really, you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to be confident, and you have to work within the parameters. So, yeah, that's a really great summary of our very long conversation we had on the phone of what we're going to do. But
Right.
if you have any questions, obviously feel free to ask us, leave a comment or anything. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these things as filmmakers. And what are y'all using? You know, what bodies are y'all liking these days? What lenses are you liking these days? You know, so let us know, because we love hearing about, you know, what pairings you guys are doing. You know, are you guys shooting on?
Absolutely.
Are you shooting on the?
It's a big community.
Yeah, are you shooting on the original pocket camera and using
the OG
Angenu zooms, or what are you using? You know, you know, we know some guys.
Well, sometimes you just if you're running and gunning, you have to have, you know, a body and lenses that are more mobile.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
and sometimes if you're in a more you know, you're in a structured, stagnant environment, you can have, you know, you can have a bigger body,
Yes.
the bigger lenses. So it just depends project to project. And but well said, Jacob. And we will come to you with more information on the next episodes.
See y'all later. We appreciate you checking out the podcast today. And if you want to see more of these, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell notification, and you'll be notified, obviously, when we release more of these. If you're on the go, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and iHeartRadio podcast is on all 4 of those as well. We appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.